8 years ago, the Pedestrian Safety Review Board was created to make Macon's roads safer. Since then, the board says the number of pedestrian incidents is down year to year, but pedestrian deaths aren't. In 2015, 6 pedestrians were killed in crashes. In 2021, a record 17 pedestrians died on Macon roadways. And last year, the number of deaths wasn't far off at 15, according to data we got from the Bibb County Sheriff's Office. Those numbers differ dramatically from other cities and counties in Georgia that are similar in size to Macon, like Warner Robins and Houston County combined having 4 fatal pedestrian crashes last year. Savannah also had 4. But if the purpose of the county and state-funded organization is to make roads safer for pedestrians, how are more being killed now than when the board was formed? I took that question to Greg Brown, the chair of the board.
We are making a concerted effort to improve the infrastructure for pedestrians.
One of those improvements was completed this year to redesign Jeffersonville Road. It's been a plan since 1994, but before construction began 5 years ago, the Pedestrian Safety Review Board made recommendations that would better suit pedestrians. In those same 5 years, there have only been 2 pedestrians killed on Jeffersonville Road, but on what can be considered Macon's deadliest streets, like Pionona, Mercer University Drive, and Eisenhower Parkway, there have been 2 or more fatal crashes in 1 year's time. Though we asked, we don't know the locations of pedestrian crashes that weren't fatal because the sheriff's office said they would charge us up to $7,000 to get that information. For a board dedicated to pedestrian safety, I noticed something strange. In sifting through agendas for the board's monthly meetings, there's no mention of a discussion on the county's fatalities or any other pedestrian crashes, but Chairman Brown insists they're happening.
Conversations are being held every month. The board meets monthly, and we are able to talk through incidences that occurs with pedestrians.
Major Brad Wolf with the Sheriff's Office has been a part of the board since its inception. He says those conversations, they're had a lot less often than when the board was first created.
Over time, we've started talking more about infrastructure and the road design and pedestrian measures and things like that. We don't review the accidents as much as we did. We have that information available when we're there if they want to discuss them, but we don't usually go into depth discussing the actual accidents.
So let me ask, which conversation do you think is more beneficial? Discussing the actual pedestrian fatalities or discussing ways to improve infrastructure?
Well, in the short term, discussing the pedestrian fatalities and what actually caused them. In the long term, the infrastructure and pedestrian calming measures on different roads, crosswalks, things like that.
According to the Bibb County Code of Ordinances, the PSRB is to include 2 members from the Sheriff's Office. Wolf says those members are himself and Lieutenant Davis.
They don't always attend every meeting.
Wolf explains that for a period of time, he was out of work with an injury, leaving Lieutenant Davis to pick up more responsibility that sometimes took precedence over board meetings.
It wasn't that we didn't want to be there or just kind of snubbed our nose at them. It was just we had conflicts that prevented us from being there.
Yet he thinks the board is making progress. From the start, the PSRB's primary initiative has been the On the Move campaign. It's a measure with a focus on the roles and responsibilities of pedestrians, drivers, and passengers as they move from one location to another throughout Macon-Bibb. Originally, that initiative was completely funded by a grant from the Governor's Office of Highway Safety, but the Pedestrian Safety Review Board was denied that grant for the 2023 fiscal year.
We don't have any indication of why we were denied. The Governor's Office of Highway Safety, they received numerous grants from other communities, and unfortunately, they can't support every project or every community at their request.
In an email, the communications director for the GOHS said the agency doesn't comment on decisions to award or deny any grant application. So we turn to reports completed by the Highway Safety Office from 2019 to 2022 for answers. I requested all of the documents for evaluations or audits of the board since it was first awarded by the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. They sent me these from 2019 until now. In 2019, Georgia's Governor's Office of Highway Safety assessed the board as low risk in a pre-award risk assessment. Later that year, the board received a $24,000 grant. They would complete 5 out of the 8 milestones outlined in that grant and go on to spend $17,000 of the funding. A large part of the board's focus is education. That year, more than $16,000 was spent on educational materials from the Sign Store, ARC Document Solutions, and Matchup Promotions, all companies that provide printing services. Even though Macon ended 2019 with pedestrian deaths still in the double digits, the board spent less grant money in 2020. In a phone call, the communications director for the Governor's Office of Highway Safety explained to me that organizations are expected to spend the grant money it's awarded. The funds can go towards equipment or even law enforcement hours, whatever's necessary to meet its goals. The next year, 2020, the board was elevated to medium risk. Out of 8 milestones outlined in the grant, none were completed that year. According to documents from the Georgia Office of Highway Safety, the board says COVID-19 impacted its ability to meet with groups both large or small. The auditor, though, said their goals were realistic and could have been met. Now, according to the safety office, on-site visits for their grantees aren't always done. But beginning in 2020, the Bibb Pedestrian Board has had an on-site visit every year. At the time of the 2020 visit, the board hadn't spent any grant money, despite what the auditor called a huge jump in pedestrian fatalities throughout the years, further demonstrating the need for the On the Move campaign. By the end of that grant year, the board purchased 4,300 phantom armbands, spending just over $14,000 of its $23,905 budget. In an evaluation, the reviewer noted that growing pains from new personnel could be the problem. She believed that previously, the efforts of one individual was keeping the board afloat. Documents say in 2021, the Pedestrian Review Board maintained its medium risk. Then, 4 months into the grant term, a status report stated while the board was working harder to be compliant, it again had made no purchases and spent $0 towards the On the Move campaign. Money that's designed to be spent towards improving pedestrian safety. Of the 6 goals outlined in the grant, the board had only completed 1. In that same report, the evaluator advised that Macon-Bibb's grant not be renewed. But it was, for 1 more year at least. Last year, 2022, the Macon-Bibb Pedestrian Safety Review Board was deemed high risk. It received its lowest grant award, $18,000, despite requesting $23,000. The board would go on to spend just a third of that, $6,450, which according to GOHS documents likely went towards more reflective armbands. Though the evaluator recommended the board be given another grant for the 2023 grant year, she suggested one-on-one training for board members because documentation of spending was 30 days late multiple times. The Governor's Office of Highway Safety didn't take that recommendation and denied the board funding for this year.
That doesn't mean we won't continue to get out in the community and educate.
The state agency instead granted $50,000 to Bike Walk Macon. Though the sheriff's office doesn't count fatal crashes that involve bicyclists as pedestrian crashes, there were 2 last year, according to the coroner. But Chairman Brown is optimistic about the board's future, and he says the Pedestrian Safety Review Board is already working on a new application for the 2024 grant year.